today then by introducing our first speaker. The first speaker is Thomas Cherian. Thomas is a PhD student in the Center for Neuroscience at the Indian Institute of Science, and he works in the Vision Lab with SP Arun. Thomas's background is in psychology, and he's interested in understanding how complex visual stimuli are encoded in visual cortex. And today he's going to talk about amodal statistical completion of occluded objects. Okay, Thomas, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, I'll just share the screen. Can you see my slides? Okay, so yeah, hi everyone. I'm really pleased to be able to share my work regarding the representation of occluded objects. Excuse me? Shall I go ahead? Okay.
Did someone say something?
I think David was unmuted, so just muted him. So everything's fine.
Okay.
My fault, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so if you see occluded displays like this, let me just get my pointer here. So if you see occluded displays like this, we don't think that this is basically a cut object placed next to the occluder. And this is kind of what previous studies have already shown. This is kind of obvious if you consider the fact that the cut object has extra features, which is this cut contour, and which obviously makes the this display different from the occluded display. Now, we are asking a different question. We are asking which of these two objects do we think is behind the occluder? And we felt that this object with the curved corner is more likely than this object with the sharp corner. This is because the occluded display, actually, the visible portions of the occluded display also have curved corners. And similarly for other displays with sharp corners. Now, it doesn't make sense to make a direct comparison between the occluded displays and the separated displays because a lot of features have changed here. Instead, we thought it best to compare the arrangement of multiple shapes in your perceptual space. Now, to get the measurement of objects in perceptual space, we measured the perceptual distance between pairs of stimuli using visual searches like these, where the task of the subject's task is basically to identify the oddball target and indicate its position with respect to the vertical red line. Now, we can simply ask if the pairwise distances between occluded objects matches better with the pairwise distance from likely or unlikely displays. And we hypothesize that the match between likely and occluded arrangements will be more than the match between unlikely and occluded arrangements. And we can see that the occluded dissimilarities correlate better, or the likely dissimilarities correlate better with the occluded dissimilarities as compared to the unlikely dissimilarities. And furthermore, if we use the likely dissimilarities to predict the occluded dissimilarities, we get a significantly smaller error than when using the unlikely dissimilarities to predict the occluded dissimilarity. Now, the difference in the correlation doesn't seem that large. So to visualize this difference better, we took the dissimilarities between shapes and scaled them down to 2 dimensions using multidimensional scaling to get a visualization of the perceptual space. Now, the objects are just marked by numbers here, but we can see that the arrangement of these objects or these occluded objects matches better with the arrangement in of the likely objects as compared to the unlikely objects. And similarly, the same can be observed for all stimuli in my experiment. So from experiment 1, we can conclude that the representation of occluded displays matches better with likely displays because of the consistent curvature or lack thereof. Now we went a step ahead and wondered if the number of protrusions of occluded displays like these is represented in a more likely way, where the number, frequency, or the frequency of the protrusions is dependent or is determined by the number of protrusions of the visible portion of occluded displays. So we did the same kind of experiment as before, and again we can see that the likely dissimilarities correlate much better to the occluded dissimilarities than unlikely dissimilarities. And again, the likely dissimilarities are a better predictor of occluded dissimilarities. And the same way, if you look at the arrangement of these objects in perceptual space, we see that the arrangement of the occluded shapes matches much better to the arrangement of the likely shapes than compared to the arrangement of unlikely shapes. So from experiment 2 also we can conclude that the representation of occluded displays matches better with the likely displays, again because they have consistent features. And in conclusion, this means that amodal completion is not simply the extrapolation of occluded edges. It is amodal completion actually extrapolates the statistical properties of these occluded objects. Thank you. Yep.
Thanks very much, Thomas. That was a great talk. So I'll wait and see if any questions come through. So please,
Sure.
Please remember to ask your questions, and if you'd like to ask them on screen, just to write on screen beside your question. So could you explain a little bit more about the perceptual distance metric?
So the perceptual distance, we're basically taking we do a visual search basically, and there's an oddball target in this visual search surrounded by distractors, which are all the same object. Now the idea here is, if the target object is represented in perception very dissimilar or differently from the distractors, that means that these two objects are very dissimilar, and hence you will have a very short reaction time. Conversely, if they are very similar in perception, you will have a large reaction time. And we just see that taking the reciprocal of the reaction time is a much more consistent measure of this dissimilarity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have a couple of questions. Okay, this is from Ilian. No, sorry about that. These properties seem to be based on shape and less so on texture. Would you expect the same if varied texture properties like color?
So when we're working with color, I think the bigger problem, so if you're going to vary the color, you kind of change some aspect of the object itself. But even...
Sorry, she also added or roughness or hue, if that helps.
Okay. Roughness is in some sense similar to what I've done with the numerosity set. So I've only shown a few objects here, but we have objects which have like random protrusions. So they seem like very spiky, rough, spiky balls, and we're just changing the number of spikes, which are like not in any pattern per se. So roughness is kind of what we've done in the numerosity set. But I'm not sure how color or hue would behave here, because there's a good possibility that your perceptual system just ignores that, or maybe the shape perception might just or like the shape properties might overpower the color properties or something like that, because we've only used grayscale stimuli here. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers the question exactly.
Thank you.
I think there's a question regarding, so the results are not from brain scans here. This is just behavior actually. And yeah, in the future, I do plan to look into neural responses from behaving monkeys. And that's the upcoming plan, where we're going to look at trying to see if monkeys can actually tell me what they see behind the occluder. So I'm currently training monkeys to do tasks. And basically, we will record neural responses from the IT cortex and see like if neural activity predicts behavior or vice versa.
Wow, that sounds really exciting.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, how large is your stimulus set?
So I have 16 shapes across in each of these experiments. But each shape is presented either as occluded or as a likely and unlikely completion. So each of these, so it's like essentially I would have 16 into 3 shapes here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit about what you might be expecting to see when you record from IT? Are you thinking that will sort of line up with the perceptual space that you're seeing now?
So I've not really thought about like what response or what activity in the from the neural space I want to look at. But primarily right now, my aim is to look at behavior, and we do see some promising results where monkeys, without being trained, at least for us, they seem to have some preference for completed displays or the likely representation. But I guess, so this response is not very consistent, as in they don't say occluded displays are similar to likely displays all the time. But it is definitely, they don't say that occluded displays are equal to unlikely displays. So the idea, what I think would be interesting is to look at, okay, there is a pattern of behavior here which is not entirely consistent, as in they don't always say occluded displays are likely. So I'm guessing there's a, there's some neural representation of this behavior, right? So that's probably something I might be interested in looking at. And of course, I can look at how each object or how multiple objects are represented in the neural space also, and possibly I might get the similar kind of arrangement that we saw. And instead of perceptual, it will be in like neural space or so. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. I'm really looking forward to those results. I think it's.
Yeah, me too. I think Mohammed has a question here.
We have one more question here. Have you tried non-occlusion control as in two disjoint objects that fit perfectly?
Could you elaborate on that question, Mohammed, a bit? I'm not quite sure what you mean by two disjoint objects that fit perfectly. If you mean like cut displays where I have the occluder and like the object just shifted with like a cut edge, that has already been done by many people, but we feel that that's not exactly the correct way to do this experiment, because if you look closely, there are certain issues in that kind of experiment design where you directly compare, I guess, disjoint objects, or as Mohammed refers to here. Yeah.
Great. Well, we'll thank Thomas again for a fantastic talk and a really interesting discussion.
Yeah.
So